Everybody's crowding round the room. I love you all, baby.
Welcome to Every Friday with Dan and Olivia. I'm Dan Miles.
And I'm Olivia Darvo.
On episode...
Hello.
Hello. On episode 33, which we ended up calling Peacock Envy, Olivia and I discussed our pet peeves and what animal we would transform into if such things were possible, and our nominations for a perfect film. We invited you, our listeners, to submit your own answers, and many of you took us up on that offer. So I'm going to read your responses now. Are you excited to hear what the listeners have?
I'm very excited. This is exciting to hear the kind of responses that we've had.
To get a reminder that people actually listen to this.
Yeah, exactly.
It lives beyond this room we're in.
That it does.
So I'm going to start with the movies. The premise was to name a perfect film, meaning one that you consider to be flawlessly executed that couldn't be improved on in any way. 2 listeners said there's no such thing as a perfect film. Or a perfect anything, for that matter. Well, fair enough, but that kills the whole bit, doesn't it? I picked Miracle on 34th Street with 12 Angry Men as an honorable mention. Olivia went with Harold and Maude with Being There as an honorable mention. Tom's choice was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Then after the show aired, and he realized we both picked 2 films, he added The Iron Giant as his honorable mention.
Actually, I love that film. That's a great film. It's got a lot of heart.
So now we're going to hear what the listeners had to say. It should be noted that, for the most part, none of them had any prior knowledge of anyone else's answers. A few people posted theirs publicly, but most were submitted directly to me privately. And interestingly, no 2 people chose the same film, with one glaring exception. There was one film that was picked by 4 different listeners.
Oh, really?
So in the lingo of the internet, it was definitely trending. I know these 4 individuals well enough to know that this was not a case of pandering to your mom, who appeared in this film. But The Beatles, A Hard Day's Night.
Really?
Number 1 answer.
Wow.
Robert, here in LA, said, a perfect movie. I don't know, that's a hard one. A Hard Day's Night was perfect for me. I still love it. Still tight on the music parts. Wonderful in black and white. Brian in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin says, my perfect movie is A Hard Day's Night. They were all spotlighted, but I always like George's scene the best. Mm-hmm. Fun movie, great music. Our pal Shell Bootsy Bass Beckwith up in Winnipeg also went with A Hard Day's Night and added the Blues Brothers.
Great.
That's his honorable mention. Kevin in Highland Park, Illinois was one of those dissenters who says, a perfect movie. He says there's no such monster. They're all good. He says, my cop-out answer, if you force me to answer, I might go with A Hard Day's Night or Jimmy Plays Berkeley. But The Wizard of Oz is probably the only perfect movie. So here he says there's no perfect movie. Then he submits a pretty solid choice. Man, those flying monkeys really freaked me out when I was a kid.
It could be very scary to children.
The stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, my son did not like it when he first saw it. It has to kind of creep up on you after age 8.
I was 6 or 7 when I first saw it. I did not care for the flying monkeys.
Yeah, the flying monkeys are scary. You know, they're like that man in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the one that has he looks like a Nazi and he's got the glasses. He's the one he's like, Charlie, you'll have the golden ticket. Scary,
creepy.
Man.
Well, yeah, very, very good. Tom, super enthusiast co-host Travis in West Jordan, Utah, says he thinks Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Sting are both perfect films. Raiders is pretty much a given, considering Tom mentioned Travis has seen that movie over 600 times. That is his comfort food. His honorable mention, Travis's honorable mention for a more recent perfect film is Brooklyn, which came out just last year. Mark in Tucson says The Matrix is his favorite movie of all time because of the writing, the characters, the special effects, the action sequences,
Very groundbreaking.
The soundtrack, the philosophical questions of reality. He says it may not technically be a perfect film, but it's perfect for him. Grace in Miami Beach, Florida nominated The Godfather Part 2.
Oh, there we go.
Saying, no matter how many times I watch it, I still love it. Robert De Niro. Next, we have Amy in Milford, Delaware, whose perfect movie is Splendor in the Grass. Jeff
like
in
that film.
Oklahoma City went with L.A. Confidential as his perfect film. Joe in Gilbert, Arizona chose The Lion King. Patty in Glendale, Arizona picked Steel Magnolias. By the way, he has small children. He's a friend of mine.
Wonderful.
He
No,
has small
I
children.
love The Lion King.
I think he's the only one who went with like a Disney anime young film.
Yeah. It's great on stage, too.
Patty in Glendale, Arizona picked Steel Magnolias. I'm trying not to comment on the facial expressions in the room. To each
Boy,
his
that
own.
lion was just
To each
great
his
on
own.
stage.
Patty in Glendale, Arizona picked Steel Magnolias with Notting Hill as an honorable mention and an extra shout out to the James Bond series of films. Randy in Los Angeles says Goodfellas is her perfect film. Tammy in San Luis Obispo chose The Sound of Music.
Wow.
Christine in Middletown, New York also took a musical route. She picked My Fair Lady with West Side Story as an honorable mention. Mike in Philadelphia's perfect movie is Monty Python's Life of Brian.
There we go.
That's what I'm talking
That's the
about.
spirit.
Gino in Grove City, Pennsylvania nominated The Shining as his perfect film. Perfectly creepy, I'll grant you that.
Yeah.
There's a little clip I saw floating around of Jack Nicholson preparing himself for that moment where he smashes through the door. He's like, smashing the door. Okay, I'm ready, roll it. You know, it's like, it was a trip, man. It's hilarious. He's
Yeah.
like working himself up.
Yeah.
Paula in Waterloo, New York, who was the creator of your Peter Sellers collage,
Oh, hi, Paula.
she picked Lost Boys
Great.
with The Shawshank Redemption as her honorable mention.
Love that movie.
Alan in San Marcos, Texas went with It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, there we
Hard
go.
to argue with
Now
that
that's a perfect movie.
Our good friend Ron in Imperial, Missouri chose Almost Famous, which I know is also a favorite of Tom and Travis. And Ron's honorable mention is the movie that Tom has based his life on. He says he went to see the first Star Wars film with his cousin, knowing only the title and the poster. That's all he knew. Said he just went in. Yeah, he'd heard it was cool. He said it was a mind-blowing experience. He said he felt like he was the perfect age to see it. Larry in Pittsburgh chose The Untouchables. Ghostbusters was his honorable mention. I think I'm going to start abbreviating honorable mentions to HM instead of saying that every time. By the way, Larry does his own podcast, which is called The Guest Room Podcast, and he's promoted our every Friday show, and also my music podcast on his show, with no solicitation or bribes or threatening letters from me. So I thought I'd return the favor by mentioning his. He focuses mainly on pop culture and science fiction. So everybody check out The Guest Room Podcast sometime if you feel so inclined. Earlier, we heard from Kevin in Highland Park. We have another listener in Highland Park chiming in, so that appears to be a hotspot for us, Highland Park, Illinois.
Wow.
John from Highland Park nominates Seven Samurai. He also has a slew of HMs, including your mom's other big hit, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yay!
Lawrence of Arabia, On the Waterfront, and Singing in the Rain. Now, Robert in Phoenix, who is the creator of our famous Tom at 20 jingle, he felt compelled to explain his thought process.
Well, this is good. I'm anxious to hear what it is.
And consequently, he submitted the longest answer. But he wrote was interesting. What he wrote was very interesting, so I'm going to read it. He says, the highest compliment I can pay an actor is to forget that I'm watching the actor in a role and see only the character. Very few actors can really achieve this. Mostly for this reason, I choose Sling Blade. There's not a single actor in that movie who is not completely believable as their character and disappears in their role. Perhaps Robert Duvall, who appears only in one scene, is a bit mannered, but any film where Robert Duvall is the weakest actor is definitely an amazing film. John Ritter and Dwight Yoakam are almost unrecognizable in their roles, although their appearance is not really altered. Daniel Lanois' unique soundtrack really adds to the feel of the movie. The original composer had an entirely different take, making a silly theme for scenes in which Carl appears, almost making a joke out of the character. Lanois understood Billy Bob Thornton's vision for his film, and with understatement and skill, creates moods and atmospheres that enhance the movie quite a bit. I feel like I'm reading a professional review here.
It's a good point, though.
Yeah, he's not done. Finally, the storyline is unconventional, not just in subject matter, but in the way that the typical Hollywood build-up to a big finale never happens, much like the work of Faulkner or Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's more
Gabriel Garcia Fortes.
okay. It's Cortez, then. Okay, you want to call him that? It's not his name, but it's probably closer than I was. It's more about a sense of people and a place. We get to know both as the story moves along steadily and slowly. We haven't gotten to it yet, but we have pet peeves coming up. He says, he goes on to say, let me add to my pet peeves actors that everyone considers to be great, like Robert De Niro and Jack Nicholson. He says, yet I am always aware that I'm watching the actor, not the character. I would love to hear an actor's thoughts on this. Do you have any actors on your podcast? Wise guy.
Yeah, you got a little bit of a sarcastic tone there, mister.
Yeah, Robert De Niro doesn't disappear into his roles now. Before you answer that, I have to say that when I'm watching you in a role, anytime your character does not have your natural accent, you immediately just disappear to me. I think, well, that's not Olivia, and I just see the character. So what do you think
So he's
about
saying that is this particular gentleman saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing?
He's saying he doesn't want to sit there watching a movie going, I'm watching Robert De Niro. He wants to think I'm watching Jake LaMotta.
Okay.
He doesn't want to think, oh, Sylvester Stallone. He wants to think Rocky.
Yeah.
So he says when he watches Sling Blade, he never thinks Billy Bob Thornton. He thinks Carl.
Right.
So what do you feel about that?
I don't know. You could use somebody like Alan Rickman, who uses, I'd never seen him with the exception of the Butler as anything else than having that particular voice, because it's just undeniably great, and why shouldn't he use it pretty much? It's almost like he's Alan Rickman, but then he does take on these roles. And I don't necessarily think that just continuing to use your own voice keeps you in the same vein, playing the same thing all over again. I think you just, sometimes it's something that's inherently, some actors like to keep it. And I think sometimes that works for them, especially somebody such as himself who has, and obviously he's passed now, which is so sad, and I can't believe that he's not with us anymore. But his work just speaks for itself, and his voice is such a big part of why his work is so great.
Well, I'm thinking of Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne. When you see them in something, you want to see Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne. You want to see the thing they do.
Yeah.
You don't want to see John Wayne be famously Genghis Khan. You don't want to see Humphrey Bogart be anything other than Bogart.
Right.
Now, he can be named Rick, or he can be named anything else. He can be named Sam Spade or whatever. You want to see Bogart. Then you've got your Gene Hackmans and your character actors and your people that, I kind of understand what he's saying. I guess that was the whole thing that Betty Davis had with Joan Crawford, where she sort of derogatorily called Joan Crawford a movie star and herself an actress. Understanding the designation there. It's like,
yes,
I'm the real thing and you're not. And Tom at 20 is going to be good today.
Yes.
I mentioned the facial expressions earlier.
Yeah, he's full of piss and vinegar, as they say.
Listen, our last submission before we get to the other ones. This comes from Bob in Nassau County, New York. His response is particularly interesting because he initially misunderstood the question.
Right.
Misunderstandings.
Misunderstanding. We all have them.
Right. He thought we were asking for the recipe of how to make a perfect film.
Oh, okay.
So listen to his premise. He says his perfect film would star Gregory Peck and Humphrey Bogart as undercover spies out to stop Hitler.
Oh. With
the aid of a beautiful super spy played by Olivia Dabo. He says the bad guys would be played by James Mason. He knows what show he's answering the questions for. He said the bad guys would be played by James Mason, Max von Sydow, and Marlon Brando.
Oh, I'm loving Max von Sydow being thrown in
and
there with
Marlon
anything that I'm participating in.
How do James Mason, Max, and Marlon Brando work as a team? That's interesting.
But it's interesting. It's unique. I can see it. It's a visual, visceral experience. I'm liking it.
She likes your movie, Bob.
Loving it.
Do a Kickstarter, earn the money.
Yeah.
We'll bring some of these guys back from the dead. Technology allows us to. Well, I told him I appreciated the creativity of his response. Then I went on to explain what we were really after. So he came back with Oliver Stone's JFK. He calls it a masterpiece, dramatizing events central to our history and challenging the populace to do some research. The film led to document releases, which is true. Says it was a thrill ride to watch. He says Kevin Costner brought Mr. Smith Goes to Washington to Dallas, 5 stars, but Olivia should have been in it. So he is really kissing your butt.
Okay.
So that wraps up topic 1 of 3. I went with that one because it's just basically just a list. It's so subjective. But before we move on to, the animals, how do you feel about the fact that...
The animals?
Well, yeah, the animals.
The animals, like...
Right. Before we move on to that, I just want to point out, we got responses from male and female listeners, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, Canada, Facebook members, Twitter followers,
I'm so thrilled that we we have people out there that are not only willing to participate and give us their feedback, but I'm just loving all these answers, and it seems like we're all from the same tribe, which is very exciting.
Well, it's going to get better as we go along.
Let's move on to the animals now.
This has been paced in a certain deliberate manner.
Okay, I hope there's unicorns. That's all I have to say.
Well, let's see what there is. The question was, and by the way, when we did that Peacock Envy thing, I was like, I had some ideas for topics. I can't get a whole show of that. So as people recall, I just tossed a bunch of little ones in there. When it came to this one, I honestly have no idea how I thought of that question. It's not the type of thing I would usually think about. Okay, so the question was, if you could transform into any animal other than a human, feeling what it was like to be an animal.
Before or after ayahuasca?
We're going to leave that out of it. So I remind everybody, my own pick was a blue whale. So I wanted to be 100 feet long.
Mine was a bearded dragon.
Olivia went with bearded dragon. Tom, without specifying a particular one, chose bird.
Yes.
Okay, well, in terms of a trending topic, birds was by far the most common answer. It wasn't even close. I guess there's something appealing about the magic of flight. 11 different listeners chose some variation on that theme. Again, with no prior knowledge of what each other would say. Like Tom, 3 of them just answered bird. Pick a bird, any bird. That would include Katie in Miami, Bob in Nassau from JFK, and Michael in Ontario. 6 listeners specified an eagle.
Wow.
That would include Jeff in Oklahoma City, Mike in Philadelphia, Nancy in Sacramento, Mark in Tucson. If you're wondering why some of these people didn't do a perfect film, not everybody gave me 3 answers. Some didn't either decline to or... Okay, so anyways, eagles. Jeff in Oklahoma City, Mike in Philadelphia. Nancy in Sacramento is what reminded me of that because she didn't submit a film. Mark in Tucson, Robert in Phoenix, and Margaret in Campbell River, British Columbia. Nancy says that being an Air Force brat, she gets an adrenaline rush anytime she travels by plane or even just goes to the airport to pick someone up. So her animal would be a bird of prey, she said, like an eagle or a falcon. Mark says he remembers sitting on top of a mesa at Canyonlands National Park looking out and below to the convergence of the Colorado and Green Rivers and thinking it would have been nice to be able to fly closer for a better view and experience the many intricate canyons from the viewpoint of an eagle. I'm reminded people do that, is it parasailing? But what's the one you just do? You kind of can fly these days.
Yeah, it's so exciting.
I really wouldn't have the nerve to do it, but you can kind of experience flying over canyons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I might do the ultralight where you pilot it, but there's one where you're like wearing wings and going for it. It's not called parasailing, though. That's the one where you're pulled by a boat, I think. Anyways, wow. I digress. Robert Slingblade Jingle at 20, he says that while other animals are tethered to the ground or to the water, birds have a domain of the entire sky and the ground and the water. He says, so what more could a creature want? He says he'd be an eagle because birds of prey are just really freaking cool. And finally, Margaret in British Columbia says that while the eagle isn't her favorite animal per se, if she had to transform, she would want their astounding eyesight, their ability to fly over sea and land and mountains, their varied diet to stave off hunger, their lack of natural predators. I mean, she really thought it through.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely didn't take it to that degree.
How long do they live, I wonder?
An eagle?
Yeah.
No idea. That will be a homework assignment for the listeners. Or as Tom always says, to the wiki. And moving away from the eagles, but staying in the air, Peter Sellers Paula in New York, she chose a dragon. It is a fantasy question, so you might as well pick a fantasy animal.
Exactly.
So take that, you tiny little eagles. She added that it would also be fun to be Bigfoot until someone got out a gun instead of a camera. So between dragons and Bigfoot, she's definitely working the fantasy realm. Along the same lines, Christine in New York says she thinks either owls or butterflies are her spirit animals, one for wisdom, the other for spiritual renewal and growth. Since it's a fantasy anyway, I suggested she be a butterfly owl. And since she's a prog musician, I recommended she do a concept album about it.
Yeah, just as a
Butterfly
triangle.
Owl. Yeah, that's it. Okay, Peter Gabriel's Lost Genesis album, Butterfly Owl.
Standing on one leg.
That's a cool mashup because she's right. Owls for wisdom, and butterflies for renewal.
No, owls are really cool.
And finally, rounding out our aviary, we have Kevin in Highland Park, who picked Wizard of Oz for his movie. He says, you might think I'd be something elegant like a lion or something dangerous like an alligator. He says, but no, I'd be a duck. He says, a duck, you say? Yes, a duck, because a duck can run, a duck can swim, a duck can fly, and a duck can dive underwater. He says, yes, I would like to be a duck.
Good point.
Yeah, there you go. So we have some generic bird and some eagle and a freaking duck.
Yeah.
And, they're also the special occasionally.
Covered all
L'Orange.
the poultry.
Yeah, that's right. Well, speaking of water, our other Highland Park listener, John, went with dolphin. So did our friend Larry in Pittsburgh. He said he'd be a bottlenose dolphin because they're sleek, fast, and damn smart.
Yeah, they are.
Now, humorously, Amy in Delaware chose a gazelle, while Gino in Grove City chose a cheetah. So that has a potential for an interesting encounter.
Absolutely.
They both had the need for speed, but Gino went with the predator side, and Amy went with prey. So it's interesting. I just read those two answers. I go gazelle, cheetah. Wait, gazelle, cheetah? Gino meet Amy. Off we go. Wild
They
Kingdom.
sound like two new top models.
Well, staying with the cat theme, Travis in Utah went with cougar. Joe and Gilbert, who we recall picked the Lion King, went
Yeah.
with lion.
Right.
Got a fetish
Good
for that. Grace in Miami Beach went with tiger. And Randy in L.A. flipped the powerful jungle cat theme on its head by choosing to be an ordinary little kitten.
Aw.
So shifting from felines to canines, we had 3 listeners who went the dog route. Shell in Winnipeg went with German Shepherd. Alan in San Marcos chose Basset Hound. And Patty in Glendale, she'd be any kind of dog as long as her owner spoiled her rotten. Nice. And then rounding out the miscellaneous category, Brian in Beaver Dam chose Black Bear. He reasoned that it wasn't as mean as other bears, but still, no one's going to mess with you. Ron in Missouri is famous for his love of apes. In fact, I've known him for like 5 years on Facebook, and his profile picture that whole time
I've seen
has been
that.
an
Oh,
ape.
that's Ron.
Yeah,
okay.
you know, right?
Yeah,
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 that's
yeah.
Ron.
He's a Twitter follower as well.
Yes,
Hi, Ron.
yeah, he's one of the few people who encounters us in both worlds.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, super supportive of both podcasts.
Very nice.
Meaning Friends of Dan Music Podcast. And finally, Robert in LA says he'd be a snail because he acts like one. And then he adds, or a slug. Is there a difference?
But I
So
think
one
it's
has a shell, right?
Yeah, it's sort of cool that I think it's kind of cool to be mobile with your home on your back.
But he's the only one who
hands on your
tried to pick an animal that resembled his personality.
Oh,
For
I
most
see,
people,
yeah.
it's like escapism. Like,
Of course.
no one's ever going to go, hey, Dan, you're such a blue whale. You know what I'm saying? But, I would hope. I got a little bit of a spare tire. So interestingly, while many listeners followed Tom up into the sky and a couple followed me into the sea, Miss Bearded Dragon over here is literally the only person who went reptile. So what does this tell us?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, well, what do we conclude by that? That of all the 20-something people, the only one who wanted to be a reptile was you.
I think possibly because I'm a little bit of a misfit.
You know what? I think people have an aversion to snakes because snakes have no limbs. Like the idea of like, I'm going to transform into animal. My arms and legs are gone. I'm freaking out.
Yeah, but the thing about bearded dragons, which I think I might have expanded on when we last spoke about it, is that bearded dragon, especially a female bearded dragon, they're primitive. They're like little baby dinosaurs. So to me, it was like having a little baby dinosaur. And what I learnt from her, if I had to think about a lesson that she taught me, was how to get back to our primitive self and just her way of life, her way of living, and all she really needed. It was so simple that I actually learnt a lot. That in actuality, she was the least complicated animal that I'd ever known.
Perhaps it is because of those ancient quote unquote genes. They got it down. They know their trip.
Exactly.
I just find it interesting that in your case, the listeners actually knew your pick. And nobody said, I'll be a whale, which was my pick. Nobody said I'll be a reptile. And they didn't necessarily copy Tom, but you think about it, people, their mind goes to flying.
Yeah,
And Paula's went to, flying and breathing fire.
exactly.
So anyways, that was interesting to hear people's take on it.
A lot of people there that you have.
We have our French flags again.
Yeah,
we
we
are
do.
once again in Tom's studio at the time of day when the light hits.
reflection of the French.
Okay, so that's 2 down. Finally, we have our pet peeves. Mine was people who whistle loudly in public.
Yes.
Olivia's was drivers who pretend they're asking for permission to cut in front of you when they're obviously going to do it anyways. Just as Tom led the trend with Bird, the trend for peeves is definitely leaning towards driving and drivers.
Yeah.
Mark in Tucson says his pet peeve is drivers that don't pay attention, just general inattentiveness. Mike in Philly says his is people who pass you on the right. Michael in Ontario, he calls out people who race past you only to hit their brakes or turn and slow down. Like, they're in a big hurry. Oh, they're not. It's like,
Yeah.
couldn't you just stayed behind me to do that? Our friend in Canada, Shell Beckwith, He gets peeved by people who stop dead in a merge lane. Now, speaking of which, Nancy in Sacramento says her pet peeve is drivers who don't know how to merge into traffic. She says if you're merging, you yield to those already on the road you're merging onto. You don't pull in the lane going 40 and expect freeway traffic to slow down for you. I see this daily, she says, and seem to have to brake and put myself at risk of being hit from behind or hitting the merger. Then they give me the finger or a dirty look as if I'm in the wrong. If I can get over, I will, but sometimes I'm turning on the next exit, so there isn't time. Who are these idiots, and who taught them to drive? Good question.
Yeah, back to the DMV, you.
Right. So, I guess everybody hates bad drivers because they put our lives at risk, let's face it. Another trending peeve involves poor character. Amy in Delaware gets peeved by liars and cheaters. Patty in Glendale says, tell me the ugly truth any day, but don't lie to me. Grace in Miami Beach says that liars who can't remember their lies just drives her insane.
That's pathological is what that is.
Well, it sort of implies that she's okay with liars who can remember their lies. I'm sure she didn't mean that, but you can't remember your lies? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you do remember your lies. We're cool. No, she doesn't mean that.
The last lie that I told.
Well, it's true. I mean, I tend to be honest. What taught me how to be really honest was songwriting,
Yeah.
I learned how to be really honest with myself because if I did some kind of phony thing, I got a phony result, Yeah. I would say, John Lennon's song, Watching the Wheels, was the most influential thing on me lyrically because it was obviously nonfiction and it was obviously totally unique to him. He was in the Beatles, then he wasn't for 5 years. People say I'm lazy. People say I'm crazy. Well, obviously it was about his personal situation. I said, I want to write songs like that. Even if no one else can relate to it, because when I'm done recording it, I'll feel like it has some kind of value beyond. Maybe I'm a guy who went sailing one day. Sailing,
Exactly.
I don't care about it when I'm done.
Yeah, you got to stick in your truth when it comes to the narrative voice, whatever kind of writer you are.
And, carried over into my personality. Not that I was a big liar anyways, but people who lie, she's right, you got to keep track of all that.
Yeah.
With a tangled web, as they say.
Yes.
I remember a lady I used to work with, she would call in sick all the time. I'm sick, I can't come in. I'm sick, I can't come in. And then she'd go, yeah, we went to Disneyland, we were in Yosemite. And you go, when was this? Oh, the day you were sick. So anyways. Right. Alan in San Marcos, Texas, and Christine in Middletown, New York, they both get peeved by fake people. Christine explains that, she's talking about people who pretend to be nice when they want something from you. Then they just leave you in the dust once they get it. She also mentions people acting flirtatiously on social media who you're not interested in, being sworn by all the weirdos while the good ones barely say a word. So it peeves her off that she wastes all this energy on people she doesn't care about, and the guy she wants to talk to, assuming that's the case, is like, nothing happening there. Kevin in Highland Park says his peeve is mean, arrogant people that not only push people around with their words, but also try to cheat and break rules to get there first, when really there's no gain because their lives are so unfulfilled and meaningless that no amount of cutting in line, cheating, or putting others down could ever make their lives more fulfilling. Testify, Kevin. I get the feeling some of these people, Nancy with her mergers every day, they're talking from personal experience here.
Yeah.
This is funny. Gino in Grove City, our cheetah, he has two pet peeves, which are mean people and ugly sweaters.
A Christmas sweater?
So a mean person in an ugly sweater would be his worst nightmare. I don't think he meant to link those two things together, but a pet peeve, ugly sweater.
I get the ugly sweater thing.
Yeah.
I do have a certain thing about certain sweaters. Christmas sweaters, but that's more a pet peeve.
True. Well, here's a relatable one. Katie in Miami says her pet peeve is people in her neighborhood who don't pick up the dog poop. They walk the dog, they make a mess, they don't clean it up.
Yeah.
I hear that one. John in Highland Park, Illinois, went with people who litter, similar to my own cigarette flickers out the window. How about this one? Paula in Waterloo has two pet peeves. One is people scraping their plates. And get that with the fork on the plate.
Yeah, it's like a chalkboard thing.
Right. And her other one is snot rockets.
What is a snot rocket?
I've never heard that expression, but I know what she means. Just nasty boogers on people's faces,
Is that like a spit wad? Because kids do this thing where they take a little bit of...
I don't think she's talking about something... I think she's talking organic, not a manufactured snot rocket projectile product.
Right.
I think just means, nasty boogers and stuff.
Oh, right, okay.
We can follow up with her if we'd like. I just remember, way back when I lived in Germany, it was memorable if I remember it, from 1975. I was a crossing guard, safety monitor, wherever they called it, and this little girl was crossing the street. and she had a booger like from here down to her neck. It's a long, wet booger.
Oh,
it
God.
had to be 2 feet long. It was
Oh,
or
right.
a foot and a half.
Like a
Anyway,
caterpillar. Or
that's a snot rocket to me. I guess what she means is you blow your nose and.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well,
So,
it's almost worse to have somebody that you're having dinner with and you've gone through an entire dinner and you get to the loo and realize that you've got a huge piece of,
Yeah.
meat between, your teeth or spinach or whatever, and
Spinach is
that
the
person
classic,
has not said anything to you.
right.
Because it's always just better to kind of like get it out
Or mustard
of your
or
mouth
ketchup. Or,
before the entire dinner is through. Let somebody know. Help them out,
Yeah, well, I guess this making the finger gesture
or
is
saying,
supposed
hey,
to be
you got a bat in the cave.
the international
you
sign
got a
of
bat in the cave, that booger.
nonverbal. Yeah. Yeah, I guess there was
got to go.
some southern expression. My mother told me this happened in real life. Somebody told someone that it was snowing down south.
Oh,
They meant your slip is showing under your dress.
honey,
Yeah,
it's
you
snowing down
You
south.
can see some white down there. And the lady had no idea what she meant.
I wouldn't either. I'd be sort of like, well, that's a very interesting term, but what do you actually mean?
Exactly. I would have.
But you know what a bat in a cave is, right?
A bat in the cave, is that up in your nostril, a
Yeah.
dry booger? I only know because you just acted it out for me. I
Right,
saw you.
exactly. That's why I just thought we'd repeat it so that the
Okay,
listeners
snot
know.
rocket, bat in cave. Mm-hmm. You know, earwax.
I think it's
don't know.
Australian. You
Okay.
got a bat in the cave.
Well, bat in the cave, mate.
Yeah.
Put it on the Barbie.
So what else do we have?
Joe and Gilbert says his pet peeve is being on a weekend getaway and having his phone blow up with work-related matters.
Mm-hmm.
That would definitely suck. I'm going to take a vacation to get all these work calls. Ron in Imperial, our ape man, he's annoyed by gum poppers.
That would be me.
Yeah. Larry in Pittsburgh, he has an interesting one. He says, this will sound weird, but my pet peeve is small talk. Says, I see no reason why people can't just sit in silence.
That guy sounds like an East Coaster.
Pittsburgh. He's
I
kind
love
of
it.
he said
I
kind of
love
like
it.
what Uma said in Pulp Fiction. And I get that. I mean, a lot of conversations I overhear, silence would be an improvement.
Yes. He has a point, actually.
Well, how about people who talk really loud on their cell phones and include everyone within 50 yards in their conversation?
And the interesting thing is even not on a cell phone, but with an earpiece in, and that person's talking really loudly, and
Yeah.
you think they're mad because they're talking to themselves, and you can't see the earpiece.
You know, I remember one time I was driving, my son was in a car seat, and I spoke out loud. I got mad about somebody who stopped right in front of me without the brake lights, and God damn, I said something like that. He thought I was mad at him.
Yeah.
Because he was the
Aw.
only person in earshot. And I said,
Yeah.
no, I'm not talking to you, buddy.
Yeah.
Drivers make me mad. If that was a bad driver. Then he used to start to ask me, he's only 4 years old.
Yeah.
Is that a bad driver, Daddy? Is that a bad driver? I started explaining to him. See that car just whizzed past this going 85? That's a bad driver.
Mm-hmm.
This person, that's a bad driver. And he learned, It was kind of interesting. I just don't want him to think I was like, "Dad, what are you doing back there?"
Exactly.
Okay, let's wrap this up here. Robert in L.A., our slug snail guy, he says it bugs him when he gets bills in his change that aren't sorted the same way. You know what I mean? All the presidents aren't facing the same way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an OCD. I mean, I will take my change and organize my bills. I will do that.
Does he
But I don't
shine
call
his
it a
change?
page. I don't know how serious to take his answers. He's kind of like screwing with us. Travis in Utah says his pet peeve is when people don't really listen to you when you're explaining something.
I get that.
Then they act surprised later when you retell them as if they're hearing it for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm explaining something to you, and then they go, like they've never heard it. Weren't you listening? Randy in L.A., our little kitten, she submitted a one-word pet peeve, racism.
Yeah. There you go.
Getting pretty heavy on us. I don't know if I'd call that a pet peeve. That's more of like an social...
opinion.
Yeah, an opinion. No, it's like, pet peeves to me are like the gum poppers. It's not like the, hey, gum poppers, snot rockets, racism. Pretty heavy. Okay, Robert, Sling Blade Robert, again, submitted many words. He says, for some reason, many people seem to have lost the ability to use contractions properly. He says, unlike the ongoing misuse of there, T-H-E-R-E, T-H-E-I-R, T-H-Y apostrophe R-E, and also two and two, T-O and T-O-O. He says, this contractive dysfunction seems to be a more recent devolution of the English language. He says, nowadays I see a lot of I should have, you could have, he might have, meaning O-F instead of apostrophe V-E.
Right.
He sees that in Facebook comments. You should be should have, could have, not should have, could
Like
have.
coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I know a lot of people who really do get annoyed by poor grammar and misspelled words. They try and correct people all the time, put themselves in the role of school teacher. Good luck with that. I think that's a losing battle. In my case, I often misspell words on purpose for comedic effect. That's why I have to turn autocorrect off. Like, I'll get with ya,
Yes.
GITWITCH, and it'll spell it the correct way. No, it's a sense of humor. We're almost at the end here now. In fact, there are 2 left. Brian in Wisconsin has an interesting one. He says, my pet peeve is religion related. I'm Catholic, and over the past 50 years, the way Mass is celebrated has become too loose. We've lost the sense of the sacred. I'd kind of lost my way for 20 years, but now I'm back to being more serious about my faith. I want the real thing. I know what he means because I took my mother to church one time after a long absence myself, and I remember kind of being surprised by how casually everyone was dressed, T-shirts and jeans. I mean, in my day, people really dressed up for church.
Yeah.
And I guess he's... I think that the church became lax on it because they just needed bodies in the pews, Yeah. If you come straight from... I went to a wedding one time. Everybody's dressed up. This dude came straight from the garage. He's covered in grease. I thought, dude,
church.
Dude, maybe go home and take a shower, and maybe don't come at all. And anyways, But I understand what he means. It doesn't feel like the church as the sacred vibe he wants.
Sure.
Okay, our final pet peeve comes to us from Jeff in Oklahoma City. You're really going to love this one. Jeff says his pet peeve is when people tell the fabulous Olivia Dabo to shut up.
You got so much flack for that, and it just happened inadvertently.
It didn't actually even happen. I'm never going to live it down, apparently, but it never happened. I would never say those words, shut up, Olivia. Mm-hmm. I might say, be quiet, pipe down, shut up. I would never be that rude.
Right.
So I'm going to give you, and I have to say, of all the pet peeves I received, the one that made me laugh out loud was that. I read that.
One, yeah.
He Twittered me that, and I go, it's a pet peeve. Tell Olivia to shut up.
Apparently it did me too.
People do listen.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you the opportunity right now to exonerate me of that.
Just let me put on your gloves, and then we're good.
Sure. You're welcome to borrow my gloves. Okay. I'll get you your own
black.
pair. No, I will say that the great shut up controversy and also the stop pointing at me drama, that's actually some of our listeners' favorite stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know what that's called? Chemistry.
Yeah, okay. So, I want to thank everyone who contributed, and I want to praise everyone for the awesome answers. We do love hearing from you guys.
Oh, we love hearing from you, and it's just very inspirational that you guys are out there listening and that you have feedback, and just keep it coming.
And we will definitely be doing more of that. The interaction is great. I had
And it sounds like we've got listeners from all over the country, which is kind of really cool.
Yeah, I was kind of going to do a breakdown of it. But
even Canada as well. We
had three or four in Canada. We had East Coast, we had West Coast, we had Midwest. We had Southwest, if you want to break it down. We had, male and female. I remember you spoke when we started doing this, because Olivia has this thing where a lot of people I mention her name to, they can't say her name without including the word crush. There was a period of time where you were this big crush for all these guys. And so you were like, are we going to have any female listeners, Dan? Is this going to be? And so, hey, there's your proof.
Oh, it's
Half
great.
those responses
Makes me very happy.
Yeah, and everybody's taking the show on the intellectual level. This isn't like a Wonder Years tribute band here.
No. No, it's not.
And as far as Tom at 20, we're at 39.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. I had no
flies.
idea it was going to fly. We're going to bring him in. I just wanted to quickly say that I had thought of a couple more pet peeves that I wanted to mention. One of them is voice menus that pretend to be human beings. You call in and a voice pretends to greet you and starts prompting you as if it's a conversation between people when it's not. Like, so, how can we help you today? You can say things like, pay a bill, close your account. You know what I mean? It's like, don't pretend to be a person.
The American Express voice?
Yeah, that bugs me. And another one is, I haven't been in this situation myself. I think you have. When you're wearing a microphone.
Yes.
And you applaud. Like, for example, a person is like, please welcome to the stage, Gern Blanston. And instead of they start going like this, and all you hear is their hands in that mic they're wearing.
Right.
I wonder, is there somebody who can, mute that? Or is a person supposed to... Anyways, as I was hearing everybody's peeves, those occurred to me. But we've actually literally doubled this. It's going to be 40. But now it's time for...
Tom at 20!
Tom.
So first things first.
Please, dear sir.
The average age, the average lifespan of the American bald eagle is 20 years.
I'm so glad that you answered that question because I've always been curious.
The oldest one on record was 29, and they achieve maturity at 5.
Okay.
That's when they start breeding.
Eagle at 20.
Oh, Dan, you're such a blue whale. Anyway.
Oh, God,
let's see.
I'm such a bearded dragon.
Going through the peeves.
I just love my beard. I've just dyed it red today. I'm a ginger bearded dragon.
The ZZ Top of the reptile community.
As we were going through the peeves, I realized that I didn't actually...
I blew through that.
I didn't give one
Yeah,
last
I blew
time.
through that. That's why I blew through it.
I only commented on the other one, so I realized I actually have one. And it ties into the earlier question, which was about perfect movies, right?
Yeah.
Something that really bothers me is people who try to break the game by saying, no, I'll choose option C because I'm so frickin' clever. Play the game by the rules that are set, okay? All right. That's really all.
Oh, you were firm with that.
And
That is definitely
I got
a piece.
chills.
And the last lie I told myself was, this is going to be the last take. This is going to be the last take, and if I don't get it right, I'm putting the guitar down and walking away. That was my last lie.
Well, that ties in.
So
with
I do remember my lies.
That ties
It's
in with our
important.
closing
Yeah.
song. It's a very separate
Yeah.
difference. And before you add any more comments, I want to plug that audiobook you did. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Oh, that's hardly necessary. We're already 3/4 of an hour into this.
But it's on the table now.
All right. Yes, I recently finished up an audiobook project. It's called Born of Water. It's an epic fantasy fiction excursion, and you can find it on Amazon and Audible and all those good audiobook places. If you just don't get enough of my voice on this podcast,
No, you have a great
feel like
voice.
you feel like you need like 11 and a half hours of me doing like dubious accents and things, then
dubious accents. I'm definitely checking this out.
by all means, rush on over to Audible and pick that up. I'll link it up in the show notes.
Do you have any other comments, or I have something I want to move on to if you don't?
I think it's probably better if I don't, because you want to still have listeners after
We
this
have
show.
we have a couple things coming up. I honestly thought that reading those answers would take 20 minutes, and next thing I knew it was 39 minutes in. But there is something I want to mention. Olivia was recently in Boston and appeared on a podcast called TV Guidance Counselor.
Oh, yeah?
And it just so happens...
Did you listen to that already?
Yes, and I'll explain how.
Oh, my God, you're so quick.
Well, I'm amazingly quick because it hasn't aired. The host of that show...
Airing today, I think. Oh, no, next Friday.
Well, yes and no.
Do you know him? He's such an amazing comedian, such an awesome guy.
It is airing today, but it's not airing today. Let me explain.
Okay.
Ken Reed, the host of that, dropped me a line, said, hey, I just interviewed Olivia.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your guys' show. It's pretty cool. And he sent me in advance of the interview you did.
Okay.
The day this episode we're recording right now airs is the day your episode with him airs.
Oh, great.
Just by
Okay.
coincidence, July 8th.
Okay.
So I want to point out to everybody, when they're done listening to this, Tom said, do you want to hear more? If you want to hear more of Olivia, it's a really cool interview.
Yeah.
You guys talked close to 2 hours.
Yeah.
You went into some things that you and I never did. Cornrowing your hair to look like Bo Derek. Tinfoil.
God, yes.
Oh, my God.
I had to put tinfoil at the bottom of it because I didn't have any beads.
Did you tell him you were on Battle of the Network
I was
Stars?
a nerd. He knew I was on Battle of the Network.
I
Stars.
didn't
It was
know
one of the things that
All right.
he and I didn't have a chance to cover, so I'm going to probably go back.
Okay.
But that being said, yes, I did. I cornrowed my own hair, and I was very proud of it. And I was completely kind of had to. I was kicked out of certain groups of girls because they didn't understand.
And you
Why?
and you cornrowed it because of Bo Derek, and you did it to yourself.
Yeah, I just thought it looked really cool, and you want to try new fads and things when you're a prepubescent child.
Well, anyways, he was very knowledgeable about your career.
Yeah, he was very.
And I've only, it's only been less than a week I've been aware of his show. I listened to yours. I listened to a show he did recently with Ted Danson. I went back and listened to an interview he did with Alan Havey, a comedian who appeared on Mad Men. I recently did a rewatch of Mad Men, so I was
Yes.
interested in that. His show usually comes out on Wednesdays, but he occasionally does a bonus episode like yours,
Yeah.
which comes out Friday. Basically, if you take TV Guide and Guidance Counselor and mash them together, TV Guidance
It's a
Counselor.
great theme.
It is, and I'm looking forward to listening to more of his. So I wanted to mention to everybody that the day you hear this, if you go look for TV Guidance Counselor, there's a nice in-depth interview that Olivia did with Ken. I touched a lot of bases in there, and besides just cornrows and Battle Network. The funny thing about Battle Network Stars is I collected 5 or 6 of those off of just somebody recorded off TV on eBay. It's surprising I didn't get one of yours.
Yeah.
By the way,
do you know that doing that show enabled me to buy my house?
Oh, wow.
I'm one of the few people that got to purchase a house at 18. I was already emancipated when I was doing the Wonder Years, and I got emancipated at 16. And doing that and winning it, I mean, God, it gave me the impetus to just go like gangbusters, and we won. ABC won. I mean, we just kicked it. We just killed it.
I got to see that. I mean, because I was watching it, and the interesting thing about it is not only the people you remember, but a lot of shows that died out and a lot of actors you forgot about, and they're completing athletically. You have an athletic quality too, even now, so I would imagine you would do well.
Oh, that's very kind, Dan.
But yeah,
maybe if I put those gloves on, I'd be even more athletic.
Well, these gloves are not like.
Do they have them for feet too?
They have them for ankles, elbows,
knees,
and everything. We have something cool we're building up to here, but I do want to toss in that I did ask Ken for his 3
topics.
Ken, Ken Reed.
His pet peeves?
Yeah, all 3.
Okay, gotta hear it.
His perfect movie, Repo Man.
Oh, yeah, there we go. He loves Tracy Walters, who was in Conan.
Tracy, yeah.
That's one of his famous... Well, he
Talk
said...
about a quirky character.
I love Tracy Walters, who was in Conan, because I love that movie, Repo Man.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
His honorable mention was Real Genius.
Okay.
You want to guess his animal?
You gotta just.
No one else has said it.
You gotta tell me. Oh, gosh.
There's a million. I'm saying it's
yes.
Once again, it was a unique one. He said wolf.
Oh yeah, that's very becoming.
And his pet
befitting.
peeve. His pet peeve. Songs that mention rock and roll in the lyrics.
Oh, I love it.
That's an interesting one.
I completely concur.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I rock and rolled. I'll give Led Zeppelin a pass, but yeah, I guess I could see that. Okay, well. Next week, we're going to be doing something new we've never done before. We thought we had done it way back in like episode 8 or 9 when we had Tom on as a guest, but we were only going to count that because he immediately kind of became a cast member. So next week on the show, we're going to have our first guest. This is going to be an in-studio guest, and I have to say I'm very impressed with this person because he's been sitting in the room patiently listening to all of this nonsense we've been doing, and I do have to add another pet peeve, which when you go to a recording studio and the AC doesn't work, and you get hot and you have to fan yourself.
Yeah,
we're not.
Get used to it, pal. It's gonna be a long 6 weeks.
Yeah, but as the 6 weeks unfold over this evening, technically the outside temperature should. We're good, but I'm going to have Olivia introduce this individual, and we will speak with him a little bit now. But we're going to have 1, 2, who knows how many episodes delving into the fascinating world that this person is bringing to our show. And take it away, Olivia.
All right. Well, if you're into horror and classical music and the Muppets and a little bit of, sex, drugs and rock and roll, this is your guy. May I introduce Mr. Bernard Rose?
I'm going to clap like my pet peeve on the microphone.
Hello. Can you hear me? I'm here.
Yes, that
Good.
deep, pithy, and profound voice of yours.
Yes.
With a nice bit of gravel.
Well, yes.
Well, welcome to the
yes.
show. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the studio. We spoke about one of your films, The Devil's Violinist. I want to ask you a question here right off the bat. On a scale of difficult to impossible, what was it like directing Olivia in a film? Is she a prima donna?
No.
Did you ever have to tell her to shut up?
No, never.
He actually had to tell me to bring it up a little. I had a very loud drum that.
There are 2 kinds of directors. There are actually 3 kinds, but there are 2 kinds in one sense, which is there are 2 schools of lion taming.
Nice.
I'm glad we're getting back to the lion
There's
theme.
the French school and the German school of lion taming, and they're not what you'd think. In the German school, the lion tamer is fighting the lions, and in the French school, they're all kind of neatly getting up and down off their little boxes.
Okay.
This is great. This is a metaphor for what exactly?
Directing.
Okay.
Lovely. And I feel compelled to do this since you've sat here for almost an hour listening to everybody's answers. Can we get your
He's got some
animal
great
transformation?
ones.
Can we get your, particularly as a film director for a living, if you believe there's a perfect film, and your pet peeve?
Well, I mean, I think I'm against the entire concept of perfection. But there are too many movies of mine to say what is a favorite film. But I think a film that seems to me to have every single element to the maximum is The Third Man.
Oh yeah, Joseph Cotton, Orson Welles.
Yeah, and the music and the
yeah.
photography, everything about that movie. Graham Greene's screenplay, Carol Reed's direction. Orson Welles. It's a very amazing movie.
And the fact that where it was filmed and when it was about sort of a black market for like, drugs.
Yeah, it's in post-war Vienna, and it's got a completely, it's sort of about an entire culture that's traumatized.
Oh yeah, you feel it.
Yeah,
it's present in the celluloid. You can feel it because of when it was done. I love the scene when they're riding up high and he goes, those little dots down there. If a couple of those dots weren't there anymore, would you really lose sleep about it? And the one where Joseph Cotton gets rushed to the book speaking thing, he doesn't realize, think he's being kidnapped, and he totally sucks. And
of course the incredible Zither score by Anton Karas, which is probably one of the most revolutionary film scores ever written.
Yeah.
In as much as that he got away from at that point, film scores were basically, had been kind of codified by Franz Waxman and, Korngold and those people who wrote a kind of very lush orchestral kind of thing, and he suddenly took it right away from there.
Not only that, is Zither,
street musician.
Is it more like a Greek instrument maybe? I mean, you wouldn't see it coming into Vienna.
It's a street instrument.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and just so you know, the reason I came up with the perfect film idea is I'd watched Miracle on 34th Street. I got to the last scene with the little cane and the note from Santa, and I had the thought in my head, wow, this was a perfect movie, like from where it started and from where it ended. I don't mean literally.
You don't need to defend yourself, Daniel.
No, well, he might not know, because what he tried at the beginning, I agree with, and Kevin and Katie.
You're either the sort of person who takes a word literally,
I'm
or
not
you're
defensive.
not.
I'm not being defensive, I swear. No, I'm just saying there's a lot of people made that point. Yeah, what's your perfect anything? Well, there isn't a perfect anything. I don't believe in perfection either. But, okay, well, we got that. Third Man. What animal would you be if you could be an animal?
The honey badger.
Cantankerous.
Oh, right on.
Well, your actors would
He
fall in
don't
line.
give a shit.
Oh, they're so tough. They're so tough. You don't look like a tough guy. Is this like a teddy bear on the outside, honey badger on the inside?
He's a Leo. Let's get
So am
back
I.
to though. He's a little bit of Leo, a little bit of honey badger. That's a dangerous combo.
The badger is a very powerful predator, but seems cuddly.
So it
Well
fools you.
said.
It fools you. Nice. Okay.
The
Pet
honey
peeve.
badger. I love how there's this honey.
As a given, your pet peeve is going to be a hot studio, and it's not unbearable in here, but yeah, it's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, my pet peeve is what I call Facebook philosophers.
Okay.
It's like it doesn't matter to me what they're saying, but people who cut and paste, like the controversial politics of the minute, the news cycle, into their Facebook meme. It's kind of like, don't be such a tool.
Yeah, well, as one of the pet peeves was people being tools. I mean, there was different ways of saying
Well,
it.
that's an interesting new word for
A
you.
tool of the media. It's like there are people who make these things up so that you will spread them around.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're not saying anything. You're just being led.
Right. And then there's the whole area of clickbait.
Oh my God! No, that's right. The listicle, I think it's called.
Yeah, the list.
Oh my God!
Top 10 messed up smiles.
Number
No,
3 will really shock you.
Yeah.
We asked Bernard Rose what his pet peeve was, and you won't believe what happened next.
That's right. Here's what happened next. A lot of spam came into your computer.
Oh man, how did I get the subscription to the Times exactly?
And by the way, all those listicles contain really nasty computer viruses
Yeah.
that will wipe your hard drive. Don't ever click on them.
Well, I'm guessing that since they're loaded with advertisements, that the people say they can tell the advertiser, we got 200 million clicks. Well, yeah, but it's people just from picture to picture. That's the idea of it. Anyways, well, that was a nice little dose of our guest. Obviously, we're going to have some good stuff coming up. And interestingly, the closing song I picked kind of ties into a lot of what we've been talking about. Last time I was here in Los Angeles, in between our activities with Every Friday, Don Breithaupt was here, sitting right on the same couch, promoting his new album. We're going to listen to something from that. And 2016 is kind of known for two things. One thing it's sadly been known for is all the iconic deaths we've been having.
Yeah, so unfortunate.
And we can't escape that. But the other thing for me personally is, in my history of my music podcast, every once in a while I'll do a new release episode.
Yeah.
Where a past guest comes back and talks. 4 out of my last 8 episodes, and probably my next one coming up, are all new releases. For some reason, a lot of cool music is coming out in 2016. So in my mind, in my life anyways, it helps balance out the loss of all these great artists. In fact, let me be specific. My last guest was John Harrington, who's been in Steely Dan for 16 years. His album is awesome, amazing playing, a lot of humor in it. Nicholas David, who people may remember from NBC's The Voice, put out an awesome soul album. Chris Robley, from Portland, Maine, put out a great singer-songwriter kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Don Breithaupt, he's kind of in the Donald Fagen kind of area. And there was this phrase floating around, because it ties in with perfection. He'd be in the studio. All of us as artists in this room know that you have to reach a point where you know when to stop. Just because you have 100 and something tracks at your disposal doesn't mean you have to use them all. Mm-hmm. So this particular guy he worked with, if he was like, maybe I could do some more than, and he'd say, death by improvement, Donnie. Death by improvement.
Yeah.
This was his expression, death by improvement. So Don liked that title, but when he wanted to write a song, he ended up applying it towards relationships. You get in a relationship, and the other person tries to improve you. Be like I want you to be. Mm-hmm. And that's his application of it. So the name of the album is Left. You don't have to learn how to spell Don Breithaupt, because he records under the alias Monkey House, which is a Kurt Vonnegut reference, I believe. So let's listen to this. Very well produced, very well performed, very well written, really slick stuff. Don Breithaupt, a.k.a. Monkey House, from his new album Left. This is called Death by Improvement.
On a mission, she's gunning for your soul. Call it blonde ambition, but it's all about control. She wishes you could make a dirty dream come true. So here's what you're gonna need to do: stack up what used to be a man, keep only the parts that fit the plan. If you can. Now it's death by improvement. She's just gonna need to change a few things. You forget where your youth went, and you won't feel the streams when it's death by improvement. You got that quirky habit, but that's just how you roll. She's gonna reach out and grab it. She's gonna bury it in a hole. She knows best. She chose you above the rest. Now want your head beating in your chest. It's gone the way of abstract art. I think the girl just jacked your heart. It's a start. Now it's death by improvement. She's just gonna need to change a few things. You forget where your youth went, and you won't feel the streams when it's death by
Okay, well, that was a cool track for sure. And I
Yeah.
also want to mention that the music we opened with, a song called Anyone, we faded it before it got to the vocals, but that's from the same album. So,
Very cool. Very
yeah.
sophisticated. Very Steely Dan.
oh yes,
Yes.
yes. And anybody who wants to hear all about the album, listen to my hour-and-a-half conversation that was recorded in this room with Don. It's actually episode 100 of my other show. I didn't know. I had Jamie Glazer on from Jean-Luc Ponty, John Anderson. We ended up breaking that into 2 episodes. I didn't know, so I didn't realize that was going to be my big 100, so it was not commented on.
Right.
Okay, well, hey, what an episode we had today. What
It was
for
really
people
fun.
who don't know, we record these in batches, and this was our first episode of the new batch. We'll be doing more for you. And as we've mentioned, next week, you've heard from our guest, Bernard Rose. You've got a sense of his personality. It's going to be good stuff. And we hope you will join us next week for that. And I will say goodbye.
Goodbye. Join us next week.
See you next week.